Now, if you just want to see the nuclear crisis, then just click at this part of the video. But if you do want some historical context about the Suez Canal crisis, then just watch the video for historical context. Now let's hop into this video. A nuclear close call, or mishap, or whatever people use, I don't know what the term is. But it is a very light term to say we almost messed up and nuked the wrong guy or the right guy on wrong or false pretexts. But I'm just going to use the term nuclear mishap because it sounds more official and makes me sound very, very fancy. So let's talk about the Suez nuclear crisis, which was a part of the Suez Canal crisis. Now let's picture the scene. It's 1958 and Egypt would begin to nationalize the vastly important Suez Canal. This wouldn't go well with the owner of the canal at the time, Britain, and Britain and Egypt had a conversation which basically went like this. Hey Egypt, I own the Suez Canal, can you leave it? I'm sorry but I can't hear you. You wanna know why? Why? Because you forced us to make this canal with our own blood and sweat and now you just wanna take it from us? Why don't you take your tea and shove it right up your... During Egypt's early stages of nationalizing the Suez Canal and before the invasion, Egypt would gain support from the USSR and other nations I don't feel like listing because I'm lazy. While Britain was able to gain support from France because Egypt supported Algerian rebels and Israel because Egypt and Israel, they're going to have a lot of wars coming in the future. Along with the fact that Egypt and Israel fought each other during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. On top of that, there was already border skirmishes between both sides. Ironically, the US and the USSR would both support Egypt's claim over the Suez, but the US wasn't 100% on Egypt's side. The US wanted to support Egypt as the US was a former colony and during the age of decolonization, the US really didn't want to be seen as a hypocrite. The USSR would support Egypt because the USSR was really ramping up into that anti-imperialistic third world expansion of the communist people's republic in support of the worker class idea. While the US wasn't willing to fight with Egypt against its longtime allies Britain and France, they would warn Britain to not invade Egypt. Now before the crisis, Egypt was able to play off the US and the USSR against each other by not officially picking a side during the Cold War. As tension ramped up and the crisis continued, the USSR would support Egypt and would begin to threaten any nation that would counter Egypt's claim over the Suez Canal, mostly Britain and France. Egypt's plan was just to wait this whole situation out. On the other hand, Israel, Britain, and France would begin to draw up plans to invade Egypt. Now the plan for Britain, France, and Israel was that Israel would invade Egypt through the Sinai. While Israel and Egypt were fighting this war, Britain and France would then send a ceasefire notice to both sides. Now, Britain and France were sure that Egypt wasn't going to accept the ceasefire deal. Due to Egypt not accepting the ceasefire proposal, Britain and France would then invade the Suez Canal under the story of protecting British and international interests and to topple Nasser. And on October 29, 1957, war would break out. Israel would invade Egypt from the Sinai. As Israeli forces began to push back Egyptian forces in the Sinai, British and French paratroopers would then begin to land on this port. It's not Port Said, it's Port Said, I think. And they'd also land on Port Fahad. Wait, it's called Fuhad? You know what? And it all seemed to fall into place. But wait, and they should probably roll up that mission accomplished banner they had in the back because the international community was outraged. They were pretty pissed. Seeing the action as an invasion, the international community was shocked and began to side with Egypt, including the superpowers of the time, the US and the USSR. Due to the political outcry and anger, the British, French, and Israelis would then pull out of Egypt. After only a few days of fighting, everyone left, except for Egypt that now had control over the Suez Canal. Also, Egypt had to open up the Strait of Tiran to Israel, and on top of that, the Sinai would be placed under UN watch until 1967, where Egypt would then gain control. Now, I'm sure you're now asking, hey, where's the nuclear crisis we were promised? And I would respond, slow your horses, you apocalyptic vault-dwelling or baggage carrier or courier or Russian police officer who's just having a pretty bad Monday. Now, during the invasion of Egypt, the US really didn't plan to fight Britain, Israel, France, or Egypt. They kind of just wanted to stay out of the whole problem militarily, but they were pretty mad politically. During the whole crisis, the Soviet Union would talk big smack about how if Egypt was occupied or invaded, that they, the USSR, would bomb France and Britain into oblivion. And some people think that the USSR would have not been capable of doing anything they wanted to, but whatever the USSR end goal was, the big talk would cause the big spook. This big spook would spook America, leading to the almost nuclear response to the almost totally that didn't happen Soviet invasion of the Middle East on November 5th of the crisis. Now, during the crisis, NORAD, now for those who don't know, NORAD is the US and Canada's nuclear warning system, reports and detects nuclear launches and things of that sort. It's that thing you might see in a movie. Now, NORAD at the time would detect reports of unidentified planes over Turkey, Soviet MiGs over Syria, and there's messages of unexpected Soviet naval movements in the Dardanelles, and also reports of a British bomber crashing. Now, this of course scared America, and now the fear of a Soviet offensive into the Middle East was becoming a real thing, causing the US to actually consider whether or not nuking the Soviet invasion into the Middle East, which didn't happen for those who don't know. Now, I am kind of over-exaggerating this whole situation. I hope I am, and that they weren't really on the doomsday button right there. But as more time and more info came in, the Soviet movement in the Dardanelles was later found out to be a Soviet training exercise. The MiGs over Syria was really just a Syrian president on his way back from Moscow, and the British bomber that went down due to technical difficulties. And the unidentified planes over Turkey, those unidentified planes over Turkey were really just a wedge of swans. And yes, the term for a group of swans flying is called a wedge, not a group of birds that almost caused a nuclear war. And who would have known a group of swans? I mean, a wedge of swans, the bird of love, would ironically almost cause a nuclear holocaust that would have killed a whole lot of people. Now talk about poetic justice in real life. Or irony. Depends how you see it.
For if the bomb that drops on you gets your friends and neighbors too, there'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know. Universal bereavement and inspiring achievement. Yes, we all will go together when we go.